in the hole. But the program right now is sitting on $260,000 in their coffers as a surplus.
But yet we hear they're behind. Is that because they can't hire enough people or haven't?
Well, because the state of Oregon put a freeze on all hiring.
All right.
We tried to get them to use some of the surplus a number of times to hire people so that the slowdown in getting the cards out and stuff could be taken care of. But it's across the board state hiring freeze that stops that from happening. Now, they have, to put it simply, raided the coffers of the OMMP twice, totaling over $1,200,000, I believe.
Clean out the end balances?
Yeah.
No,
Well,
what
yeah, what it was that they raided everybody, but other than the OMMP, about the only other agency out there with extra money in their coffers was like Fish and Game, because they're the ones where you actually pay for what you're using.
the medical marijuana, no money from the general fund funds the medical marijuana program. The medical marijuana program has always been self-funding, and left uncontrolled has always had huge surpluses.
Right, but what Jim is saying is that the legislature went in and took some of the money out of the end balance.
They took $900,000
one time.
One time, and since then, the advisory committee and the program has been making sure that it's a smaller number that's the surplus number.
So no general fund money in, but they do occasionally take it out, or have.
Correct.
Got it. All right.
But that's, I think, responsive to your question. It doesn't matter that the state's $3.2 billion in the hole. The program is fiscally sound, and it's just going to be more sound as these fees come in.
And there is the money there to set it up and get it going, and eventually, of course, that would be even quicker than when we did the cards as far as the program becoming self-reliant.
Okay, thank you, Jim. And thank you, William. Appreciate it. Next question, sir. Name and hometown, please.
Hi, I'm Leslie Brown. I live in Medford, Oregon. And I would like to say that the doctor who said there's no scientific evidence or that he's not aware of it, but there is anecdotal evidence, that's a moot point. Medical marijuana is legal. It's been passed since 1998. So the issue is not whether it's good or bad. It's whether we should make it easier to dispense it or dispense it in a different way. The only arguments I hear from the law enforcement officers, and I've read in the Mail Tribune, is that there's too many growers. It's difficult to enforce the grow. I don't hear about violent crimes or property crimes or massive addictions. So my question is to Leland. Doesn't it stand to reason if the complaint is that we're taxing the resources of law enforcement officers, if we make it easier and lawful to streamline and to dispense this, that it would reduce the taxation and the burden of the law enforcement officers?
Well, I think so. I mean, that was what I was trying to say earlier. I mean, I'm not going to say that there isn't any diversion of medical marijuana that's cultivated for patients to the underground market.
Yeah, and that's
I
not
do
gonna
think,
stop. I mean,
and notwithstanding,
it's going to exist since.
Except that I think people are going to be incentivized to listen. If you can get, what did you say, $2,100 a pound to the underground market, and you could only get $1,000 a pound to a dispensary, but you were accepted from arrest and prosecution, and you didn't have to find X number of $1,000 to hire me, plus $1,000 each time I come down here, you know.
So I fully support Measure 74.
Well, I got that you did, and
yes.
but I'm just saying, in terms of the law enforcement aspect of it, my expectation is that it will decrease diversion to the underground market in the same way that the Medical Marijuana Act decreased patients having to go to the underground market to get their medicine.
Exactly, because we haven't heard anything except that it's a burden on law enforcement.
And I thought, frankly, that you were unfair to the physician who testified or who spoke previously. I heard him say that there's evidence on both sides, and I know that there's some contrary evidence. I also know that this last summer, the Canadian Medical Journal published a huge study on neuropathic pain. So my view is that it's settled. His view is that it isn't, and that's why there's chocolate and vanilla, I guess.
Understood. Leslie, thank you. Appreciate it. Let me go back to Tim George and Erik Fisher. Can you quantify the hours you're spending, the person hours you're spending in your agency dealing with just following up complaints about medical marijuana? Is there a trend line on that, a chart, graph, something that tells you how much more time you're spending on these?
I can't.
The state police is collecting, anytime, correct me if I'm wrong, anytime that there's a marijuana-related offense, there's a box for a state trooper to check about whether it's a medical case or a non-medical case. Can you share with us what percentage of those are medical and what are non-medical?
Yes, but I need to clarify, we don't track every time somebody calls us with a complaint about medical marijuana. So we don't track the reporting of complaints. Some agencies do, we just don't. I mean, that's, we have, 40 or 50,000 cases a year statewide. I mean, we're a state agency. We do a lot of different stuff besides marijuana. So it just becomes a numbers thing and what you're going to track and what you're not going to track. I can say that, we collect information from drug enforcement task forces around the state, and they report to us numbers from their reporting. I can say that Polk County, for example, estimates that 85% of their marijuana cases are OMMP related. There are other counties that report 28%, which is more along the lines of what Oregon State Police has trended for the last couple of years. So it depends on how many marijuana cases you do. I mean, if you investigate 5 cases and 4 of them are OMMP related, it's 80%. So the statistic in itself can be misleading without all of the information. So
I have a question here from online that would fit in that. The question was basically that the widespread abuse is overblown, and that please ask Erik Fisher if he can document more than 1% abuse. Is there, of medical marijuana users, or more than 1% of the people who are legally using it, or who are allowed to use it, are there abuse problems with more than 1% of those folks? Or?
How would I know?
You don't have access to the database.
I don't have access to the database, so I couldn't, I mean, like I said, we don't have access to the 40,000 patients that are in the program to compare them to how many of them are lawful. We don't have the ability to go do an enforcement check. I mean, it's a knock on the door, and if you have a reason to contact them, great.
Tim George, you're leaning in.
Tim might have an answer to that. I think the question is in response probably in part to
the answer was
media
lies, damn
coverage.
lies, and statistics, and that's what I always tell him. But the 3 types of lies. But again, we don't know, and Eric's absolutely right. You don't know, so how can we do the comparisons? Number one, but number two, I can tell you that, and my friend to the left here is correct when he talked about the number of marijuana plants harvested in the 7 counties in the southern region. You'll see at the end of the year that probably 50% of all the plants harvested in the state are going to come from that region. That's because we went fishing for it. It wasn't because it isn't there in those other counties. So those numbers can be deceiving too, because where you're going to put the effort, where you're going to look is where you're going to find it. But as far as the OMMP stuff goes, he just gave you a statistic, Polk County at 85%, and I'm not sure what the 28% county was.
Well, that's an average.
That's an average, so.
That was 85% of their cases.
Of their cases, of their marijuana cases were OMMP cases, so.
Right, but
the numbers.
So again, I think it's a thing that Jim or Christine might be able to. Hasn't the program reported to the advisory committee the percentage of patients that they've been contacted about?
Yes.
Could you identify yourself also?
Oh, I'm Christine McGarvin, and my information from this perspective comes from being on the ACMM.
Which is the
Advisory Committee for Medical Marijuana. We advise to the department. We've asked for statistics from law enforcement on exactly what numbers of convictions and numbers of investigations there were. And in Washington County, the entire West Side Interagency Narcotics Task Force in 2009 had 28 investigations and 8 total arrests, which is way less than 1% of the number of people registered as patients in Washington County. Last year also, from the Oregon State Police, we received information saying that 33% of their investigations were OMMP related, and that was out of a total of 72 investigations, so it ended up being right around a total of 33 investigations for Oregon State Police for Josephine County, I believe that was. So what we're talking about are very tiny, tiny numbers when it really comes down to the number of people who are on the program. If there's 40, we were told 45,000 people that are patients right now currently, and there's less than, let's say, 10 convictions per county. That's less than 1% of the population on the program. So it's a small amount. I just wish that and this comes from me personally, not as representing anything, but I wish that they would focus their crime efforts on tracking actual criminals, pedophiles, and people who are really abusing the system, and leave the medical marijuana program alone.
Next to the microphone, Larry Medford.
Yes, thanks, Jeff. I'd like to address briefly the property owner versus the renter. What is the responsibility of the property owner when and liability when marijuana is being produced on his property by his renters? And from two perspectives, whether he's aware of it or whether he passively is ignoring it.
This has been an issue I know, particularly in the Eureka Arcata area on the California side. But Erik or Tim, can you tell us about the effect in Oregon?
Well, is it illegal activities? The first question we got to ask, because you can rent property and still
no,
do it.
if it's legal, if it's
legal?
within the numbers.
Well, if it's legal,
If it's legal, law enforcement doesn't get involved.
We don't get involved.
Okay, but to avoid the helmets and all, what if the person comes to you and tells you, because of this 4-month lag or something, I want you to know this is what's going on at this address, and it is legal. It has its papers and no minimum number of plants and that sort of thing.
I got a call from somebody in Josephine County, said that somebody offered him X number of tens of thousands of dollars to be able to have a legal garden in a property that this person owned. And, you know, is it legal for me to do that? Can I, well, you can't sell medical marijuana under current law. You can only be reimbursed for the supplies and utilities, and if you're growing outdoors, that's not typically very much. If there were to be a forfeiture action brought because of the illegal sales, an owner could have what's called an actual innocent owner defense, but you'd have to be an actual innocent owner. And if it looks fishy, it probably is. Okay. Does that
Well, if you're aware of it as the property owner, then you're not innocent.
Correct. Or I think, but the actually innocent owner, I think also includes where you know, somebody offers you a lot of money to do this, you know, then you're sort of on some kind of notice or inquiry notice.
You can't acquiesce to the crime. If you suspect there's a crime, like you said, if it smells fishy, probably is. But if you think that it's legal, I mean, if that's the auspice that it's legal, if it's legal, law enforcement's not coming. We don't care. If it's legal, we don't care.
And the other thing is, you know, it's the kind of thing that you could consult with you know, we were talking before about the business lawyer for nonprofits. There are lawyers who have expertise in property law and landlord-tenant law who you could consult with as a landlord about what you could write into the lease to protect yourself. And I would encourage you to do that. Because, you know, we've been talking about this.
I'd like to get the rent paid, that's what.
I hear you. We've been talking about this in the context of state law, but, you know, all of this is illegal under federal law. Yeah. So, you know.
But to just briefly, would you accept a visit to notify you so that we don't have that 4 months in there? Or you
But they're not the ones who do the registration, right? I mean, it still has to go through the Department of Human Services, correct?
We wouldn't turn you away. I mean, as far as OSP, we would take your information, but unless you did something to get, you know, it's to start an investigation, we wouldn't really do anything with it. I mean,